Hello, uh, this is Sharma, Indian Ancient India, class 11, chapter number 2, the construction of ancient Indian history. Material remains. The ancient Indians left innumerable material remains. The stone temples in South India and the brick monasteries in Eastern India still stand to remind us of the great building activities of the past. But the major part of these remains lies buried in the mounds scattered all over the country. Only a few have been exposed to give us some knowledge of the life of the ancient people. Since most sites have been dug vertically, they provide a good chronological sequence of material culture. Horizontal diggings, being very expensive, are very few in number, with the result that excavations do not give us a full and complete picture of material life in many phases of ancient Indian history. Even, is, Even in those mounds which have been excavated, the ancient remains have been preserved in varying proportions. In the dry climate of western Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, and northwestern India, antiques are found in a better state of preservation, but in the moist and humid climate of middle Gangetic basins and in the deltaic regions, even iron implements suffer corrosion and mud structures become difficult to detect. It is only in the face of burned brick structures or stone structures that impressive and large scale remains are found in moist and alluvial areas. Excavation have brought to light the cities which the people established around 2500 BC in northwestern India. Similarly, they tell us about the material culture which was developed in Gangetic Basin. They showed the layout of settlements in which people lived, the type of pottery they used, the form of house in which they dwelt, the kind of cereals they used as food, and the type of tools and implements they handled. Some people in South India buried along with the dead their tools, weapons, pottery, and other belongings in the grave, which were encircled by big pieces of stone. These structures are called megaliths. Although all megaliths do not fall in this category, by digging them we have come to learn of the life which people lived in the Deccan from the Iron Age onwards. The science which enable us to dig the old mounds in a systematic manner in successive layers and to form an idea of the material life of the people is called archaeology. Material remains recovered as a result of excavation and explorations are subjected to various kinds of scientific examination. Their dates are fixed according to the radiocarbon method, but for which facilities exist in India. The history of climate and vegetation is known through an examination of plant residues and especially through pollen analysis. Thus, on this basis, it is suggested that agriculture was practiced in Rajasthan and Kashmir as far back as 6000 BC. The nature and the component of metal artifacts are analyzed scientifically, and as a result, the sources from where metals were obtained are located, and the stages in the development of metal technology are identified. An examination of animal bones enables us to find out whether the animals were domesticated and also to point out the uses to which they were put. Coins. Although a good number of coins and inscriptions have been found on the surface, many of them have been unearthed by digging. The study of coins is called numismatics. The ancient Indian currency was not issued in the form of paper as in the is the practice these days, but as coins because paper came to be used in India much later. In the 14th century, ancient coins were made of metal such as copper, silver, gold, or lead. Coin mounds made of burnt clay have been discovered in large numbers. Most of them belong to the Kushan period, that is, the first three Christian centuries. The use of such mounds in the post Gupta period almost disappeared, since there was nothing like the modern banking system in ancient times. People deposited money in earthenware and also in brass vessels and maintained them as precious hoards on which they could fall back in a time of need. Many of these hoards, containing not only Indian coins but also those minted abroad, such as in the Roman Empire, have been discovered in different parts of the country. They are preserved mostly in museums at Calcutta, Patna, Lucknow, Delhi, Jaipur, Bombay, and Madras. Many Indian coins are found in the Museum of Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. Since Britain ruled over India for a long time, British officials succeeded in transferring many of the Indian coins to private and public collections in that country. Coins of the major dynasties have been catalogued and published. We have catalogs of coins in Indian Museum at Calcutta, of Indian coins in British Museum in London, and so on. But there is a large number of coins which have yet to be catalogued and published. Our earliest coins contain a few symbols, but the later coins mention the names of kings, gods, or dates. The areas where they are found indicate the region of their circulation. This has enabled us to reconstruct the history of several ruling dynasties, especially of the Indo-Greeks, who came to India from North Afghanistan and ruled here in the 2nd and the 1st century BC. Coins also throw significant light on economic history. Some coins were issued by the guilds of merchants and goldsmiths with the permission of the ruler. With the permission of the rulers, this shows that craft and commerce have become important. Coins help transaction on a large scale and contributed to trade. We get the largest number of coins in post-Maurya times. These were made of lead, platinum, copper, bronze, silver, and gold. The Guptas issued the largest number of gold coins. All this indicate that trade and commerce flourished, especially in post-Maurya and Gupta times. But the fact that only a few coins belonging to the post-Gupta period has been found indicates the decline of trade and commerce at that time. Coins also contain religious symbols and legends which throw light on the art and religion of the time. Inscriptions, far more important than coins, are inscriptions. Their study is called epigraphy, and the study of all writing used in inscriptions and other old record is called paleography. Inscriptions were carved on seals, stone pillars, rocks, copper plates, copper plates, temple walls, and bricks or images. In the country as a whole, the earliest inscriptions were recorded on stone, but in the early centuries of the Christian era, copper plate began to be used for this purpose. Even then, the practice of engraving inscriptions on stone continued in South India on a large scale. We have also in that region a large number of inscriptions recorded on the walls of the temples to serve as permanent record. Like coins, inscriptions are preserved in the various museums of the country, but the largest number can be found in the office of the chief epigraphist at Mysore. The earliest inscriptions were written in the Prakrit language in the 3rd century BC. Sanskrit was adopted as an epigraphic medium in the 2nd century AD, and its use became widespread in the 4th and the 5th century. Even then, Prakrit continued to be employed. Inscriptions began to be composed in regional languages in 9th and 10th century. Most inscriptions bearing on the history of Maurya, post-Maurya, and Gupta times have been published in a series of collections called Corpus Inscriptionum Indicarum. Corpus Inscriptionum Indicarum. But not too many inscriptions of post-Gupta time have appeared in such systematic compilations. In the case of South India, topographical lists of inscriptions have been brought out. Still, there are more than 50,000 inscriptions, mostly of South India, which await publication. The Harappan inscription, which awaited decipherment, seem to have been written in a pictographic script in which ideas and objects were expressed in the form of pictures. Ashokan inscriptions were engraved in the Brahmi script, which was written from left to right, but some were also incised in the Kharosti script, which was written from right to left. However, the Brahmi script prevailed in the whole country except for the northwestern part. Greek and Aramaic script were deployed in writing Ashokan inscriptions in Afghanistan. Brahmi continued to be the main script till the end of the Gupta times, and epigraphist can decipher most inscriptions of the country up to about the 8th century if he has carefully learned Brahmi and its variations. But afterwards, we notice strong regional variations in this script, which is called by different names. The earliest inscriptions are found on the seals of Harappa, belonging to about 2500 BC. They have not been deciphered so far. The oldest inscriptions deciphered so far were issued by Ashoka in the 3rd century BC. An Ashokan pillar inscription was found by Firoz Shah Tughlaq in Meerut. He brought it to Delhi and asked the Pandits of his empire to decipher it, but they failed to do so. The same difficulty was faced by the British when, in the last quarter of the 18th century, they discovered Ashokan inscriptions. These epigraphs were first deciphered in 1837 by James Prinsep, a civil servant in the employ of East India Company in Bengal. We have various types of inscriptions. Some convey royal orders and decisions regarding social, religious, and administrative matters to officials and people in general. Ashokan inscriptions belong to this category. Others are votive records of the followers of Buddhism, Jainism, Vaishnavism, Saivism, etc., who put up pillars, tablets, temples, or images as marks of devotion. Still, other types eulogize the attributes and achievements of kings and conquerors and never speak of their defeat or weakness. To which category belongs the Allahabad inscription of Samudragupta. Finally, we have many donative records which refer especially to gifts of money, cattle, land, etc., mainly for religious purposes, made not only by king and princes but also by artisans and merchants. Inscription recording land grants made mainly by chiefs and princes are very important for the study of land system and administration in ancient India. These were mostly engraved on copper plates. They record the grant of land, revenue, and villages made to monks, priests, temples, monasteries, vessels, and officials. They were written in all languages such as Prakrit, Sanskrit, Tamil, Telugu. Literary sources. Although the ancient Indians knew writing as early as 2500 BC, or most ancient manuscripts are not older than the 4th century AD and have been found in Central Asia. In India, they were written on birch bark and palm leaves, but in Central Asia, where the Prakrit language has spread from India, manuscripts were also written on sheep leather and wooden tablets. These writings are called inscriptions, but they are as good as manuscripts. When printing was not known, manuscripts were valued immensely. Although all Sanskrit manuscripts were found all over the country, they mostly belong to South India, Kashmir, and Nepal. At present, inscriptions are mostly preserved in museums and manuscripts in libraries. Most ancient books contain religious themes. The religious literature of Hindus include the Vedas, the epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata, the Puranas, etc. They throw welcome light on the social and cultural condition of the ancient times, but it is difficult to make use of them in the context of time and place. The Rig Veda may be assigned to circa 1500 to 1000 BC, but the collection of the Atharva Veda, Yajur Veda, the Brahmanas, and the Upanishads belong roughly to 1000 to 500 BC. Almost every Vedic text contains the interpolations which generally appear at its beginning or end but are not rare in its middle. The Rig Veda contains mainly of prayers, while later Vedic texts mainly comprise not only prayers but also rituals, magic, and mythological stories. However, the Upanishads contain philosophical speculations. The two epics and the major Puranas seems to have been finally compiled by circa 400 AD. Of the epics, the Mahabharata is older in age and possibly reflects the state of affairs from the 10th century BC to 4th century AD. Originally, it consists of 8,800 verses and was called Jaya Samhita, or the collection dealing with victory. These were raised to 24,000 and came to be known as Bharata, named after one of the earliest Vedic tribes. The final compilation brought the verses to 1 lakh, which come to be known as Mahabharata or the Satasahasri Samhita. Satasahasri Samhita. It contains narrative, descriptive, and didactic material. The main narrative, which relates to the Kaurava Pandava conflicts, may belong to later Vedic time. The descriptive portion might be used for post-Vedic times, and the didactic portion generally for post-Maurya and Gupta times. Similarly, the Ramayana originally consisted of 12,000 verses, which were later raised to 24,000. This epic has also its didactic portions, which were added later. As a whole, the text seems to have been composed later than the Mahabharata. In the post-Vedic time, we have a large corpus of ritual literature, but public sacrifice meant for princes and men of substance belonging to the three higher varna are laid down in Sauta Sutras, which provided for several pompous royal coronation ceremonies. Similarly, domestic rituals connected with birth, naming, sacred thread, infested marriages, funerals, etc., are laid down in the Grihastha Sutra. Both the Sauta Sutras and Grihastha Sutras belong to circa 600 to 300 BC. Mention may also be made of the Sulva Sutras, which prescribe various kinds of measurements for the construction of sacrificial altars. They mark the beginning of geometry and mathematics. Sulva Sutra is the measure prescribe various kinds of measurement for the construction of sacrificial altar. Okay, the religious books of Jainas and Buddhists refer to historical persons and incidents. The earliest Buddhist texts were written in the Pali language, which was spoken in Magadha or South Bihar. They were finally compiled in the 2nd century BC in Sri Lanka, but the canonical portions reflect the state of affairs in the age of Buddha in India. They tell us not only about the time of Buddha, but about some of his contemporaries who ruled over Magadha, North Bihar, and eastern Uttar Pradesh. The most interesting portion of the non-canonical portion is provided by the stories of the previous births of Gautama Buddha. It was believed that before he was finally born as Gautama, the Buddha passed through more than 550 births, in many cases in the form of animals. Each birth story is called a Jataka, which is a folk tale. These Jatakas throw invaluable light on social and economic conditions ranging from the 5th to the 2nd century BC. They also make incidental references to the political event in the age of the Buddha. The Jaina texts were written in Prakrit and finally compiled in the 6th century AD in Vallavi in Gujarat. They, however, contain many passages which help us to reconstruct the political history of eastern Uttar Pradesh and Bihar in the age of Mahavira. The Jaina texts refer repeatedly to trade and traders. We also have a large body of secular literature. To this class belong the law books called Dharma Sutras and Smritis, which together with their commentaries are called Dharma Shastras. The Dharma Sutras were compiled in 500 to 200 BC, and the principal Smritis were codified in the first 6 centuries of the Christian era. They laid down the duties for different varnas as well as for kings and then officials. They prescribed the rules according to his property is to be held, sold, and inherited. They also prescribed punishment for persons guilty of theft, assault, murder, adultery, etc. Okay. An important law book is the Arthashastra of Kautilya. The text is divided into 15 books. Of his book number 2 and 3 may be regarded as of an earlier date. They seem to have been the work of different hands. This text was put in its final form in the beginning of the Christian era, but its earliest portions reflect the state of state and economy in the age of Mauryas. It provides rich material for the study of ancient Indian polity and economy. We also possess the work of Bhasa, Kalidasa, and Banabhatta. Apart from their literary value, they mirror the conditions of the time into which these writings belong. The works of Kalidasa comprises kavyas and dramas. The most famous of which is the Avijana Sakuntalam. Avijana Sakuntalam. Avijanana Sakuntalam. Besides being great creative compositions, they provide us with glimpses of the social and cultural life of northern and central India in the age of the Gupta. In addition to Sanskrit sources, we have some of the earliest Tamil texts found in the corpus of the Sangam literature. This was produced over a period of 3 to 4 centuries by poets who assembled in colleges patronized by kings. Since such a literary assembly was called a Sangam, the whole literature is known as Sangam literature. The compilation of the corpus is attributed to the first 4 Christian centuries, although final compilations may have been completed by the 6th century. Sangam literature is a very major source of information for the social, economic, and political life of the people living in Deltaic Tamil Nadu in the early Christian centuries. What it says about trade and commerce is attested by foreign accounts and archaeological findings. Foreign accounts. Indigenous literature can be supplemented by foreign accounts. To India came the Greek, Roman, Chinese visitors, either as travelers or religious converts, and they left behind accounts of the things that they saw. It is remarkable that Alexander's invasion finds no mention in Indian sources, and it is entirely on the basis of the Greek sources that we have to reconstruct the history of his Indian exploits. The Greek visitor mentions Chandrokotas, a contemporary of Alexander the Great, who invaded India in 324 BC. Prince Chandrokotas is identified with Chandragupta Maurya, whose date of accession is fixed at 322 BC. This identification has served as the seat anchor in ancient Indian chronology. The Indica of Megasthenes who came to the court of Chandragupta Maurya has been preserved only in the fragments quoted by subsequent classical writers. These fragments, when read together, furnish valuable information not only about the system of Maurya administration but also about social classes and economic activities in the Maurya period. The Indica is not free from credulity and exaggerations, but this is true of many other ancient accounts. Greek and Roman accounts of the 1st and 2nd century AD mention many Indian ports and enumerate items of trade between India and Roman Empire. The periplus of the Arturian Sea and Ptolemy's geography, both written in Greek, provide valuable data for the study of ancient geography and commerce. Once again, Greek and Roman accounts for the 1st and 2nd century AD mentions many Indian ports and enumerate items of trade within India and Roman Empire. The periplus of the Rhytharian Sea and Ptolemy's geography, both written in Greek, provide valuable data for the study of ancient geography and commerce. The date ascribed to the first ranges between 80 AD and 115 AD, while the second is attributed to about 150 AD. Pliny's Naturalis Historia, which belonged to the 1st century AD, was written in Latin and tells us about trade between India and Italy. Of the Chinese travelers, mention may be made of Fa Hsien and Xuan Chang. Both of them were Buddhists and came to this country to visit the Buddhist shrines and to study Buddhism. The first came in the beginning of the 5th century and the second in the second quarter of the 7th century AD. Fa Hsien described the social, religious, and economic condition in the age of the Guptas, and Xuan Chang presents a similar account of India in the age of Harsha. Fa Hsien describes the social, religious, and economic condition of India in the age of Guptas, and Xuan Chang represents a similar account of India in the age of Harsha. I for Xuan Chang and I for Harsha. Fa Hsien, the Gupta, FGH, Fa Hsien, Gupta, Xuan Chang, Harsha. Historical sense. Ancient Indians are charged with the lack of historical sense. It is obvious that they did not write history in the manner it is done now, nor did they write history in the way the Greeks did. We had a sort of history in Puranas, which, though encyclopedic in content, provide dynastic history up to the beginning of the Gupta rule. Statements about events are made in future tense. Although they were written much after the event had happened, the author of the Puranas were not unaware of the idea of change, which is the essence of history. The Puranas speak of 4 ages called Krita, Treta, and Dwarpa, and Kali. Each succeeding age is depicted as worse than the preceding, and as one age slides into another, other moral values and social institutions for degeneration. The Puranas speak of 4 ages called Krita, Treta, Dwarpa, and Kali. The idea of time, which is another vital element in history, is found in the inscriptions. They specify the years during the reign of a king in which important events take place. Several eras according to which events were recorded were started in ancient India. The Bikrama Samvat began in 56 BC, the Saka Samvat in 78 AD, and the Gupta era in 319 AD. Inscriptions record events in the context of time and place, and the Puranas and biographical works discuss the cause and effect of an event. All these are indispensable to historical reconstruction, but they are not found in any systematic form in the Puranas. Indians display considerable historical sense in biographical writings, which started with the composition of Harsha Charitra by Banabhata in 7th century. Indians display considerable historical sense in biographical writings, which started with the composition of Harsha Charitra, King Harsha by Banabhata in the 7th century. It is a semi-biographical work written in ornate style, which became the despair of later imitators. It describes the early career of Harshavardhana. Although full of exaggerations, it gives an excellent idea of the court life under Harsha and the social religious life in his age. Later, several other charitas or biographies were written. Sandhyakara Nandi's Ramacharitra narrates the story of conflict between the Karvata peasants and the Pala prince Ramapala, resulting in the latter's victory. Bilhana's Brikramanan ka Devacharitra Brikraman ka Devacharitra Brikraman ka Devacharitra recounts the achievement of his patron Vikramaditya 1076 to 1127, the Chalukya king of Kalyan. Even the biographies of some merchants of Gujarat were written in the 12th 13th centuries AD, but the best example of the earliest historical writing is provided by Rajata Rangini, or the Stream of Kings, written by Kalhana in the 12th century. Rajata Rangini, the Stream of Kings. It is a string of biographies of the king of Kashmir and can be considered to be the first work which possesses several threads of history as it is understood in our times. Thank you.